Imagine a place where all the knowledge of the ancient world converged. A beacon of human intellect so profound, so vast, it redefined the limits of understanding. For centuries, it stood as the undisputed epicenter of learning, drawing the greatest minds from every corner of the known earth. But what happens when such an unparalleled light begins to flicker? When the very pursuit of truth becomes a dangerous game? This is the captivating, yet haunting, story of the Library of Alexandria. More than just a collection of scrolls, it was the beating heart of ancient innovation, a testament to human ambition and curiosity. Its rise was glorious, its influence immense, but its mysterious decline and ultimate destruction remain one of history's greatest tragedies and most enduring debates. Prepare to journey back to an era where knowledge was power, and its loss an unfathomable catastrophe. The story of the Library of Alexandria isn't just about a building. It's about an audacious dream, a monumental ambition that aimed to gather the entire intellectual output of humanity under one roof. To understand its genesis, we must first turn our gaze to the aftermath of Alexander the Great's meteoric conquests. When Alexander died suddenly in 323 BCE, his vast empire fractured, divided among his leading generals, the Diadochi. One of these generals, Ptolemy Soter, shrewdly secured Egypt, laying the foundation for the Ptolemaic Dynasty, a Hellenistic kingdom that would rule Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. Ptolemy Soter was not just a military man. He was a visionary. He understood that true power, especially in a culturally diverse realm like Egypt, lay not only in military might, but also in intellectual prestige. His ambition was to transform Alexandria, the city founded by Alexander himself on the Nile Delta, into the new cultural and intellectual capital of the world, surpassing even Athens. It was a city designed for greatness from its inception, strategically located at the crossroads of 3 continents, with an unparalleled harbor destined for global commerce. It was under Ptolemy Soter, as direct patronage, that the initial concept for a grand intellectual institution took shape. Inspired by the Lyceum of Aristotle, he envisioned a center for learning unlike any before it. This vision truly blossomed under his son and successor, Ptolemy II Philadelphus. Philadelphus, a king renowned for his love of learning and extravagant projects, dedicated immense resources to realizing his father's dream. It was during his reign, around the early 3rd century BCE, that the museum and the Great Library of Alexandria began to take their definitive forms. The Mauseon, literally the seat of the Muses, was more than just a library. It was an academy, a research institute, and a true intellectual hub. It housed lecture halls, dissection rooms, observatories, botanical gardens, and even a zoo. Scholars from across the Hellenistic world were invited to reside there, provided with generous stipends, free board, and exemption from taxes. These fellows were not just librarians. They were poets, philosophers, mathematicians, astronomers, and physicians who dedicated their lives to research, teaching, and debate. This guaranteed an unparalleled concentration of intellect, fostering an environment of collaborative discovery. The library itself was the crown jewel of the Mauseon. Its primary mission was nothing less than the collection of every known book in the world. The Ptolemies spared no expense and employed every possible method to achieve this gargantuan task. They sent agents across the Mediterranean and beyond, buying scrolls from markets, private collections, and even raiding ships in the harbor. Legend holds that any ship docking in Alexandria had its scrolls confiscated, copied by the library's scribes, and then returned, with the original kept by the library. This aggressive acquisition policy, though sometimes controversial, ensured a rapid and massive accumulation of knowledge. The sheer scale of the library's collection was astounding. While exact numbers vary due to ancient estimates and the nature of scrolls, it's believed that at its peak, the library held between 400,000 and 700,000 scrolls. Each scroll might contain one or more books, or works. Imagine rooms filled floor to ceiling with papyrus, meticulously catalogued, copied, and studied. This wasn't merely a passive collection. It was a living, breathing archive where texts were translated, debated, and critically analyzed. The famous Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, is said to have been commissioned by Ptolemy II himself, showcasing the library's commitment to cross-cultural understanding and preservation. The gathering of these ancient texts represented an unprecedented act of cultural preservation. Much of what we know today about ancient Greek, Egyptian, Babylonian, and other early civilizations' knowledge in science, philosophy, literature, and history was either directly preserved or significantly influenced by the work done at Alexandria. The scholars of the library pored over these scrolls, establishing critical additions, correcting errors, and creating commentaries that became foundational for subsequent generations. The library's architecture itself was likely grand, befitting its stature. While no definitive archaeological remains of the main library building have been found, ancient accounts describe magnificent halls for scrolls, reading rooms, and colonnades. It was a tangible symbol of the Ptolemies' commitment to intellectual supremacy, a physical manifestation of the idea that knowledge was the ultimate form of power. Alexandria became a magnet for scholars from across the Hellenistic and wider ancient world, transforming it into a vibrant, cosmopolitan city pulsating with intellectual energy. The vision of Ptolemy I and the relentless efforts of Ptolemy I laid the bedrock for what would become the unrivaled intellectual powerhouse of antiquity. They created an institution that transcended mere storage of books. They forged an engine of discovery, a universal academy, and a monument to the boundless human quest for understanding. For nearly 3 centuries, the Library of Alexandria would stand as the ultimate symbol of enlightened rule and scholarly ambition, accumulating wisdom from every known civilization. But this golden age of unparalleled knowledge would not last forever, as forces of change, both internal and external, would eventually challenge its very existence. The vision of the early Ptolemies transformed Alexandria into the undisputed intellectual capital of the ancient world. With its unparalleled collection of scrolls and the unparalleled gathering of scholars at the Mausoleum, the library fostered a golden age of scientific and philosophical inquiry that would not be seen again for centuries. This wasn't merely a place for storing books. It was a dynamic, living laboratory of thought, where the very boundaries of human knowledge were constantly pushed. At the heart of this intellectual explosion were the scholars, the fellows of the Mausoleum, who lived and worked within its hallowed halls. These were the rock stars of the ancient world, brilliant minds, given the freedom and resources to pursue their research without distraction. They weren't confined by dogma. Instead, a spirit of critical inquiry and open debate flourished. This intellectual freedom, coupled with access to an unprecedented collection of texts from diverse cultures, allowed for groundbreaking advancements across virtually every field of study. In mathematics, giants walked the halls of the library. Euclid, often referred to as the father of geometry, produced his monumental work, Elements, a foundational text that organized geometry into a coherent system of axioms, theorems, and proofs. His work, likely compiled and refined within the library, remained the standard textbook for geometry for over 2 millennia. Archimedes of Syracuse, though not a permanent resident, frequently visited and corresponded with Alexandrian scholars. His work on hydrostatics, levers, and infinitesimals laid groundwork for calculus centuries later. And Eratosthenes of Cyrene, one of the chief librarians, astounded the world by calculating the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy using simple geometry and observation, proving the world was round and even estimating its tilt. Astronomy thrived, driven by meticulous observation and mathematical rigor. Aristarchus of Samos proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, placing the sun, not the Earth, at the center. an idea far ahead of its time, though ultimately overshadowed by the geocentric views for centuries. Hipparchus of Nicaea, another brilliant astronomer, pioneered trigonometry, created the first comprehensive star catalog, and discovered the precession of the equinoxes. The library's observatories, equipped with sophisticated instruments, provided the data necessary for these monumental discoveries. In medicine, Alexandria became the leading center of anatomical and physiological study. Scholars like Eratosthenes of Chalcedon and Eratosthenes of Ceos pioneered human dissection, a practice often taboo elsewhere. Their detailed studies of the nervous system, the brain, and the circulatory system laid the foundation for modern anatomy and physiology. They identified the brain as the center of intelligence, distinguished between arteries and veins, and described the function of nerves. This bold approach to understanding the human body transformed medical practice, moving it beyond superstition and into scientific inquiry. The library was also a crucible for literature and philology. Scholars meticulously collected, edited, and preserved texts from across the Greek world, establishing critical editions of works by Homer, Hesiod, and the great tragedians. They developed the systematic study of language and literature, inventing grammar, punctuation, and literary criticism. Callimachus, a prominent poet and scholar, is credited with compiling the Pinax, a comprehensive bibliography of the library's collection, often considered the world's first library catalog. This immense task of organization was vital to making the vast collection accessible for study and cross-referencing. Beyond the specific disciplines, the library fostered a global perspective. Its commitment to acquiring knowledge from diverse cultures meant that Egyptian, Babylonian, and Persian texts were collected, translated, and integrated into the Hellenistic worldview. This cross-cultural pollination of ideas was unique and incredibly fertile, allowing scholars to draw connections and build upon accumulated wisdom from across the ancient world. It was a place where different philosophical schools debated, where scientific hypotheses were tested, and where the pursuit of pure knowledge was elevated to its highest form. For nearly 3 centuries, the Library of Alexandria stood as the shining symbol of this intellectual zenith. Its halls buzzed with the vibrant exchange of ideas, the quiet dedication of scribes copying precious texts, and the exhilarating breakthroughs of minds daring to question the universe. It was an unparalleled testament to the power of organized knowledge, a place where humanity's collective wisdom was not just stored, but actively cultivated and expanded. However, even the brightest flames can be threatened, and the golden age of the library would eventually face challenges that would test its very survival. The radiant light of the Library of Alexandria, once an unassailable beacon of knowledge, began to dim as the ancient world itself entered a period of profound upheaval. For nearly 3 centuries, the library had flourished, but its decline was not a single dramatic event, but rather a prolonged, complex process influenced by a confluence of political strife, economic shifts, and changing intellectual priorities. The dream of universal knowledge, once so fiercely pursued by the Ptolemies, found itself vulnerable to the volatile realities of power. One of the most debated theories regarding its destruction points to Julius Caesar as Alexandrian War in 48 to 47 BCE. During his conflict with Ptolemy XIII, Caesar found himself besieged in the city's palace quarter, near the harbor. To prevent his fleet from being trapped or captured, he famously ordered his own ships to be set ablaze. The fire, according to some ancient accounts, spread from the ships to the docks and eventually to adjacent buildings, including, it is theorized, some of the library's warehouses or annexes that stored scrolls. While a complete single destruction of the main library by Caesar's fire is largely refuted by modern historians who point to continued scholarly activity decades later. This event likely caused significant damage and the loss of numerous scrolls, marking a visible crack in the library's invincibility. It was a stark reminder that even the most cherished intellectual treasures were not immune to the ravages of war. The subsequent centuries saw a gradual but relentless erosion of the library's prestige and resources. As Roman influence in Egypt grew, and eventually outright Roman rule, the fervent royal patronage that had built and sustained the library diminished. Roman emperors had their own grand cultural projects in Rome itself, and while some, like Claudius, showed interest in Alexandria, the consistent, dedicated funding and passionate acquisition policies of the early Ptolemies were gone. This led to a slow decline in its collection, as new acquisitions became sporadic and existing scrolls weren't always replaced. Beyond direct conflict and waning patronage, internal and external pressures contributed to its decay. Political instability within Alexandria itself, marked by frequent riots, persecutions, and shifts in power, often targeted institutions associated with the ruling elite or perceived as foreign. Scholars, once drawn to the city, might have found the environment increasingly less conducive to peaceful study. Furthermore, the intellectual landscape of the Roman Empire began to shift. While Greek learning remained foundational, the focus gradually moved towards practical Roman law, rhetoric, and administrative studies, sometimes at the expense of pure scientific or philosophical inquiry. The rise of Christianity brought another complex layer to the library's fate. As the new religion gained dominance in the Roman Empire, there were instances of religious intolerance and destruction of pagan temples and intellectual centers, particularly in the late 4th century CE. The Serapeum, a daughter, library, and temple complex in Alexandria, was notably destroyed in 391 CE by Christian mobs under the direction of Bishop Theophilus. While this was not the main library, it illustrates the destructive fervor that could be unleashed against symbols of pagan learning. The final blows to the main library, if it still existed as a cohesive entity in the 5th or 6th centuries, are less clear, possibly being a slow decay and dispersal rather than a single dramatic fire. The popular narrative of the library being burned by the Arab conquest in the 7th century is largely dismissed by historians as a myth, developed centuries later. Regardless of the precise moment or singular cause, the undeniable truth is that by the early medieval period, the Library of Alexandria had ceased to exist as the preeminent intellectual powerhouse it once was. Its vast collection was scattered, destroyed, or simply lost to time and neglect. What remained was a tragic void in the collective memory of human knowledge. Yet the legacy of the Library of Alexandria extends far beyond its physical demise. Its very existence proved the immense value of universal knowledge and systematic inquiry. The methods of textual criticism, scholarship, and scientific research pioneered by its scholars influenced intellectual traditions for centuries. Much of the classical knowledge preserved and later rediscovered during the Renaissance found its roots, directly or indirectly, in the efforts of Alexandrian scholars. The vision of a universal library, a repository of all human wisdom, continues to inspire initiatives like modern national libraries and the Internet itself. The Library of Alexandria remains a powerful symbol, a symbol of the immense potential of human intellect, the fragility of knowledge in the face of conflict and ignorance, and the enduring human quest to collect, understand, and preserve our collective heritage. Its story is a poignant reminder of what humanity can achieve when knowledge is celebrated and what we risk losing when it is not. The flame may have been extinguished, but its legacy ignites the eternal quest for understanding.